Hey guys, welcome to AITA Chronicles. Subscribe if you love chaotic Reddit drama. First story coming up.
Cheat on your wife with mine, I will burn your life to the ground. Way back in the early 2000s, I began to suspect that my wife was up to something. Our two kids were about 4 and 6, still young, but not so young they couldn't tell you something about what had happened in their day. They started talking a lot about staying with my wife's parents during the day, which wasn't really that strange in and of itself, but since they lived about 90 minutes away, doing so 2 or 3 times a week seemed a bit much. That was basically every day she wasn't working at her part-time job. When I asked her about it, she denied it, but was never a good liar. So I started tracking the mileage on her car, and sure enough, she was driving an extra 400 or so miles per week. I knew some shit was going on. Then, one day I sat down at the computer and she had left a sticky note with her AOL password written on it next to the keyboard. I could not resist and logged in to read her emails and saw a few email exchanges between her and her college BFF where they discussed how my wife was regularly fucking one of her ex-BFs from high school. No mention of details about him other than my wife also talking shit about his wife, making fun of how she'd gotten fat after having kids. Anyway, I printed out these email exchanges and stashed them. I still needed to know the details, so I called a friend who was a cop, and he suggested I call a guy he knew that had left the force to become a PI. Ron was great. I paid his retainer and gave him the emails and what little I knew about my wife's activities, and he figured out exactly what she was doing. His report detailed with photos and times, dates, and locations all about how she would take the kids to her parents, then go meet this guy for lunch, then they'd go to a dumpy motel for a few hours, after which she'd pick up the kids and return home. At this point, I hired a divorce lawyer. My parents cheated on each other, and the fallout absolutely fucked mine and my siblings' childhood. It was something that was totally unacceptable. I also asked Ron to find out what he could about this guy. Ron absolutely came through. I learned his name, Bob, that he was married and had 3 kids. I also found out that he worked as a VP of sales for his father-in-law's business. At this point, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. I also asked Ron for a couple more copies of his report, and one more thing I wanted him to do for me. On the same day I had my wife served with the divorce papers at her work, I had Ron meet with this guy's wife and show her everything he'd found out. She seemed nice, and I figured that she deserved to know what her dear hubby was up to. What she did with that information was up to her. While the information about my wife's infidelity didn't really matter in my divorce proceedings, Bob's wife did a real number on him. According to the publicly available court documents from the divorce and other related proceedings, she cleaned out their joint account, took the kids, and left. As soon as her dad found out what he'd done, Bob was fired, and since her parents actually owned the house where Bob and his wife lived, he also got evicted. Their divorce was ugly. Lots of fighting, in and evidently out of court. I guess Bob went to the house and started arguing with his wife, and it escalated to the point that her brother stepped in and Bob got his nose broken. There were restraining orders, a few more incidents with police reports, criminal charges, jail time, and so on. I can't find Bob on the internet anywhere these days. Last I heard, he'd left the state. And his ex-wife did okay. She went to work at her dad's company and took over after he retired. As for me, my ex and I got along well enough. I didn't engage with her on anything that wasn't related to the kids, and now that they're both adults, I don't talk to her at all anymore. I don't hate her or anything, but I only care in the context that she is my kids' mom and is important to them. Nothing beyond that. As of me reading this, I've got to say this was one of those stories where the revenge wasn't loud or flashy, but methodical and lethal in the most controlled way. No screaming, no confrontations, just precision strikes that tore the guy's life apart piece by piece. And really, that's the part I respect the most. The OP didn't just retaliate emotionally, he stayed calculated, gathered receipts, and let the consequences speak for themselves. A brutal but clean takedown. Anyway, that's one scorched earth saga in the books. And trust me, the next one's got its own flavor of chaos.
My ex MIL sent her church friends to harass my daughters and I. I have now exposed her family to her church community, and she's getting shamed and shunned at church. My 46 female daughters, 17 and 15, have a strained relationship with my ex-husband's parents, 78M and 80F. My ex passed away in an accident last year, and we've had some major family drama since, due his cheating and him leaving two boys born with his affair partner orphaned. She also died. Part of the drama has been my ex-in-laws trying to get custody of my daughters and them also trying to live with us. First one, we're going to court over. Second one will never happen. Where we live, there's a weekend market with fresh produce, eggs, meats, and other products straight from farmers. This week was extra special since it was my youngest birthday. Since her party is later in the month, I decided to give her a budget and set her loose on the market to get whatever she wanted, mostly chocolate and sweets. After an hour, I did start getting worried, and just before I called her, she called me. She was crying, saying some weird people have cornered her. I ran to her with my oldest daughter to find 6 older women berating my daughter for being unchristian, for refusing to spend time with her paternal grandparents, or for wanting to be a good big sister to her poor orphaned baby brothers. My daughters are the ones that found out about my ex cheating and the babies, so they aren't fond of the kids. It's trauma, and they're working with a therapist. I got between the group and my daughter, telling my eldest to go pay the stuff her sister had and to go to the car. Then I turned to the women, some who I knew from when we went to my ex-in-law's church, and ripped them a new one. They told me I was worst for refusing to obey my ex-in-laws like a good Christian wife. Barf. Eventually, the screaming turned too loud and we were all asked to leave the market. I met with my girls in the car, the women following me like a group of vultures. I managed to get in the car and drove away. After my girls went to bed, I got online to talk to another member of that church that I'm in good terms with. I told him about what happened, and after he apologized, he told me what was going on. My ex-mother-in-law posted this massive story in the church's Facebook group about how horrible my daughters and I are, how we're leaving them homeless and penniless. They inherited my ex's personal bank account and his life insurance, and how my daughters don't even talk to them. She also accused us of being the reason she lost her grandsons. The boys are now living with distant relatives of my ex-husband. Basically, it was a sob story worthy of a Hallmark movie. And of course, they were getting all the love and support from the more extremist members of their church. This church and its members are a bit annoying, especially with the LGBTQ+ topics, but they have a small saving grace. They are incredibly strict about cheating. It's a big no-no, be it from a husband or a wife equally. Now, how did she get around blaming me for the affair children without exposing the cheating? She claimed the other woman was our surrogate, since I was unable to have more children, then said I didn't want the babies because they were boys, which is absolutely disgusting to be accused of. Well, I decided it was time to clean up this mess, and since I was mid-divorce when my ex died, I had all the evidence needed, and since the divorce wasn't completed, I don't have any legal ramification for releasing all the evidence. I was off the next day and went to a print shop to get copies of all the delightful pictures of my ex cheating, his ex-text conversations with his affair partner, the ones with his parents confessing to his cheating and getting support from them, my ex-in-laws harassing me about the divorce, and my coup de grace, all the emails and text messages of them bullying my daughters about their baby brothers. In one of them, they call my daughters bastards and telling them it was their fault their father died since they told me about the affair and I began the divorce. This one was literally 2 days after my ex died. I paid extra for all of this to be printed in beautiful, high-quality paper. Then, when I got home, I sat down for hours to make delightfully personalized binders. They look like the little prayer song packets that church give for everyone to take to sing hymns. The first picture in opening the binders is my ex-husband and his side woman making out in our living room. Their faces are easy to discern, and the girl looks nothing like me, different skin tones and hair color. Underneath, I wrote ex-husband's name and affair girl's name love story. I took them to the church before service. There's a desk in the back with the songbooks for people that need or forget their own, and they never check them. The gossip mill was quick and harsh. The names my ex and his affair partner got called in the Facebook were so bad, the pastor himself had to get involved just to keep things relatively PG-13. People were angry at my ex-in-laws for their abuse to my daughters, but what made me laugh was that I was still in the wrong for the divorce, but it is understandable that I failed on my duties after the shock, and I possibly will one day return to the light, unlike my cheating husband and his Jezebel. They used another word I can't use here. I imagine. I got 2 apology letters in the mail from my girl and an invitation to join the church for support. As for my ex-in-laws, they got shamed into leaving the church. My ex-mother-in-law made a post on her wall about how alienated she feels and how no one cares for the elderly anymore, how she wished her great son was still alive since he would have taken care of her and her husband. With what money, I don't know, since I was the breadwinner. Explanation on the will. My ex-husband had a will that named his parents as beneficiaries. As far as I was aware, he had told me he had named our daughters, not them. I never pushed for me to be the beneficiary, as my own will has my daughters as the beneficiaries, not him. As of me reading this, I have to say, this wasn't just petty, it was poetic. You don't get to drag people through emotional hell, lie to an entire church, harass your own granddaughters, and expect to walk away with public sympathy. The level of precision and restraint here was impressive. No screaming matches, no empty threats, just cold, undeniable truth delivered in hymn book form. That's not revenge, that's restoration of reality. And if the church wants to see her as the victim now, let them. At least the girls got some justice. Anyway, that's one whirlwind story closed, and trust me, the next one's just as wild.
Landlord put me through 3 years of hell. My landlord was a terrible human being. Honestly, calling him a human is even pushing it. Just a few things he has done to me over the past 3 years. Stole my dryer and other household products that are in a common area. Made me pay for a plumbing repair which was deemed normal wear and tear. Tried breaking into my house. Retaliated against me because I went to my lawyer after he sent me a letter about a parking spot. He tried charging me an extra $150 a month. Mind you, I was never late for rent in 3 years, except for when he made me pay for the plumbing repair. So the next month, I was a couple days late. The list goes on. Now, this apartment was nowhere near nice. I found out the plumbing was illegal. He left me with a porch for years that has severe safety issues. The ceiling paint was always falling down, gas heater was not up to code, and so on. I finally got my chance to leave after he wanted to raise my rent $500 a month. He will do anything and everything to get more money out of his tenants. So I called the building inspector 4 days before I left. I told him everything. The porch, when he finally replaced it, didn't have a permit and was definitely not up to code. I told him about the plumbing and the heater. I went on and on. The inspector came over the very next day. I saw him taking measurements. Each violation is a $500 day fine until fixed. I honestly don't know what happened, but my God, did it feel good to finally get him back. He's at the very least on the town's radar. A week before I moved out, he tried telling me I needed to be out at a specific time. I never responded, and where I lived, that's not how it works. He tried to threaten me with the police if I wasn't gone. Well, I went to the police myself that morning to warn them. The landlord did come by, threaten me, and harass me. I called the police. They informed him I was in the right. Long story short, he had broken into my apartment. I had left to go to storage while I was gone. He nailed my door shut. I told the police to get the supervisor because I was over being harassed by this guy. Go figure, he left before the supervisor could get there. I'm positive he knew he'd be arrested on site. Got the police report, they're charging him with a felony for breaking and entering. Fines plus a charge? Don't be a jerk to good people. As of me reading this, all I could think was some people really underestimate the quiet ones until it's too late. This landlord spent 3 years being an absolute menace. And honestly, he deserved every fine, every inspection, and that felony charge coming his way. What I love about this revenge is how it didn't even need to be loud or messy. It was just smart. A phone call, some truth, and a mountain of consequences. That's what happens when you push good tenants past their limit. And speaking of limits, wait till you hear what happens in the next story. Fired for my job, but received a year's worth of pay and got my boss fired. This happened in the early 2010s, before the advancement of technology in video editing and content creation. I was hired as a content creator for a university that wanted to leverage YouTube to kickstart their branding campaign. The pay was low, roughly $2,200 USD, and in those days, there were not that many video content creators around, and the process usually took a long time from start to finish. I was hired, and on my second day, my manager presented my KPI of 85 3 to 10-minute videos in 52 weeks, which was impossible for a one-man team in those days. This meant I had to do the scripting, producing, casting talents, shooting videos, composing music. They were too cheap to pay for a royalty-free music subscription, and editing, all of which I had to use my own equipment and software because their cameras and computers were so old, they simply couldn't handle the strain of even doing things in 720p, much less 1080p. I tried to let my manager know, but she just smiled encouragingly, telling me to give it a try, assuring me if the videos were good, the quantity would not be what she would focus on. Hearing this, I agreed to give it a try. My manager treated me well in the first month. However, one day when she found out that I was a smoker, her attitude changed overnight. A colleague had actually done a facepalm when I told her about it, and she let me know that the manager hated smokers and often advocated to get them fired. She started nitpicking me on everything, from smelling like cigarette smoke after my breaks, coming in 5 to 10 minutes late despite doing more than 4 hours of overtime daily, not being contactable during break times, the list goes on. But I soldiered on because I just wanted to do the work and do it well. 5 months in, I was called into the director's office where I saw my manager putting on her best, displeased but gleeful face, and I felt my stomach drop. The director told me that she was disappointed because she had heard that I was falling behind on my work, and it was already halfway through the year, and I had only completed 30 out of my 85 videos. I tried to explain that I had been working my butt off on these videos. I literally worked 6 days out of the week, over 60 hours just to do what needed to be done. And being a one-man army made things impossible. And also the fact that the videos I had put up grossed the highest views ever on their YouTube page. I also recounted how my manager had said that she was looking for quality videos over quantity. The director dismissed this and stated that the KPI was simply 85 videos in a year. And since it was almost half a year in, with my numbers at less than half, she felt it prudent to cut the cord early. I asked how they would even meet the KPI if they were to fire me now. My manager had snorted, saying, "We'll find a professional production house to finish your work." The director had given her an odd look, but nodded in her support nonetheless, telling me, "You don't need to worry. Manager will get the job done." That was when a light bulb went off in my head. Seeing as I was the content professional in the office, one of my jobs was to keep a database of production houses to use in the event we needed to do a shoot that required more resources, and I was sure that they would be using the production houses in my database since my manager had no contacts in the production industry. So, I changed the contact numbers and messed up all the emails on all of the entries, except one. The one, I had a friend working as a junior director, not an assistant director, but a director assigned to smaller video projects. I gave him a call and told him of my plan, and sure enough, within 2 days, they were called to come in to pitch. I told him that I had a plan that was a win-win for us. It would instantly help him and put him on the fast track to a director position by bringing in that much business to his production house, and it would also benefit me financially. I would teach him exactly how to pitch to win over the boss and the director, and in turn, his company would pay me a standard finder's fee of 15%.
He agreed instantly and immediately put me on the line with his general manager, who, upon realizing this was to be 6 months of work for a high six-digit payout, instantly agreed and drew up a contract. As it turns out, after I gave them a metaphorical step-by-step playbook, they were the perfect fit, somehow understanding the needs and style of the university, as well as the sort of themes the university wanted to feature. The director and my former boss were amazed that my friend's production house was so familiar with their content that they signed them up on the spot. Now, even back then, using a production house back then was not cheap. Each video that they produced could cost double to triple my monthly salary, given that they had specialized people for each function: producer, director, director of photography, gaffer, sound person, video editor, assistant director, production assistants. But this meant that they could complete a video every 2 to 3 days. So yes, they produced 50 videos in a span of 4 months for over 100 months of my salary, and I sat back and collected the healthy 15%, which was about 15 months of my salary. This allowed me to put money aside for a holiday and the rest to further my studies with a respected film school overseas. I thought my plan ended here, and I had gotten back at my former bosses. But to my surprise, I received a call from my colleague while I was holidaying in Bali one day. This was the same colleague who had facepalmed when I told her that my manager had found out that I was a smoker. She told me that my former manager had been fired and my director given a massive blasting by the chancellor of the university. The content creation project I was hired for was only given a budget equating to about a year and a half of my salary, and they had exceeded that budget by over 10 times. My former manager was so desperate to ensure that her content creation project could be completed that she had thrown caution to the wind, paying anything to get the job done so that she could show my director that she had completed the project and had approved the massive spend without getting consent from the director. So that is how I got my friend a super fast promotion to a full director in his production house and a year of pay after getting unfairly fired from my job. There's something uniquely satisfying about when karma shows up with receipts and a calculator. Reading this, I couldn't help but appreciate the quiet brilliance of turning a screw job into a six-figure win, without ever raising your voice or breaking a rule. It wasn't even malicious, just calculated poetic justice. The manager played herself, and the fact that it all unraveled on such a massive scale, that's the kind of ending you don't even need to write. Reality does it better. Anyway, that's one incompetent boss down. Let's see what the next petty masterpiece has in store.
Neighbor was stealing water from my supply, so I ruined him. I live in Asia and just purchased a new house. Now, the previous owners were family friends who needed cash urgently and haven't been living in my country for nearly 3 years, so I got it for a great price in the middle of the capital city. The sale was finalized at the start of this month, and I moved in right after. The house was definitely a fixer-upper, as the previous owners had left mid-renovation, and the main door was locked with just a padlock, not even a door lock. The house had no gate, meaning anyone could just walk right on in. The first day I moved in, someone's bike was parked in the garage. I just parked it on the road. On the same day, I had a gate installed. An angry man was knocking on my gate later, and I didn't bother answering. But through my window, I could see him giving up and taking the bike after 15 minutes. So already I wasn't digging the neighborhood, but I didn't have any incidents after that, aside from people not knowing that this was no longer an abandoned house, so my gate was blocked more often than never. But a no parking sign on my gate fixed that issue. Last week, I was having a shower in my bathroom, and I noticed my water pressure was lower than usual. I also heard my next-door neighbor's water pump going. Now, this neighbor, an old guy, lived in a 3-storied house, the first being the lowest and the one he lived in. The other 2 floors were rented out to tenants. This guy wasn't happy about the house being sold and voiced many concerns to my friends, the previous owners. He was super angry about it, and my friends did warn me, but I'm a 6-foot guy with 3 dogs. No way he was doing anything. And yep, he didn't. So with this living situation, a water pump is needed to pump water to the tanks on the roof, since the public supply's pressure is not enough to get it up 3 stories. Now, I heard the water pump going and immediately was suspicious. Sure, coincidences exist, but it wouldn't hurt to check it out. I waited till his pump turned off, and then turned on different taps in the house. Sure enough, the pressure was back to normal. This made me even more suspicious. But if he was stealing water, it also made sense. The water bills had been going up over the years this house wasn't lived in. But the house also had some water leaks, so it was chalked up to that, even if the bills were too high to be caused just by leaks. Now it's starting to make sense. At some point in the last 3 years, this old miser thought he'd save the cost of paying for water and waltzed into the property and is siphoning water from my lines. I couldn't find where exactly he was siphoning water from, but after checking my pressure multiple times, I was pretty sure. So I sat on it for a few days, thinking if I should confront him, go the legal path, or just let it be. Now, water in my country is very cheap. My total bill, even with washing 3 animals, a car every week, and watering my garden, only costs like $5 per month, even with the neighbor also stealing some of it. But it wasn't about how much I was paying or who was paying for it. It's about entitled old people who think that they're deserving of using other people's resources without paying for it, and then getting away with it. It didn't sit right with me, and I really wanted to teach him a lesson. What I did was really simple. I just turned off my water from the mains. I wouldn't have to break into his property, nor would I be breaking any laws. It was the best way of getting back at him without needing to even lift a muscle. So on Monday, just 4 days ago, I waited till the pump flicked on and turned off the supply. Now, the way household tanks work in my country is that there's a ball valve in the tank which detects the level of water and turns on the pump. If the level doesn't increase, the valve stays open, which electronically sends a signal to the pump to stay on until the level gets to a point at which the valve closes and also shuts off the pump. However, the level wasn't increasing, and anyone knows that starving a pump of water isn't a good idea. This way, my expectation was that I'd burn out his pump and cause issues with his tenants. What I didn't account for is that his pump running constantly would mess up the fuses by constantly drawing power overnight and absolutely destroy his wiring. If he decided to upgrade his household wiring to a more modern standard, this would have been prevented. This house clearly still had 90s-era wiring. At around 3 a.m., I heard all residents in the house waking up and talking in hushed voices about why just their house in the neighborhood doesn't have power or water. I found out about the power part because the tenants devolved into shouting at their landlord. Our tenant protection laws are very important, and power and water are classed as essential on even a state level. Cutting those services are grounds for lawsuits, unless due to weather or some other unavoidable reason. In this case, the landlord is responsible for keeping the house wiring up to date and in good condition, alongside the supply of water. So the tenants were not happy, and one of them immediately moved out 2 days later when it was informed that water and power will not be returning the very same day this happened. Both tenants in the 2 floors lodged a complaint with the police, and if a person is in clear breach of laws, the police have the authority to fine or penalize the person, without a court judgment. It can be challenged in court if the person thinks that they were unfairly penalized, but they still have to pay the fines and will only be refunded if and when the court finds the fines unlawful. So now the landlord lost both tenants and has to pay a fine of $500, which is a lot of money in our country. He also has to refund the security deposits of both tenants and cannot rent out until both issues are fixed, which will cost him more money. As of right now, he's moving out on Sunday to his daughter's place since he can't afford to live alone. The tenants were his only source of income, and he's a retired mechanic, so he has no other income. He did find out why the motor kept drawing power, overloaded the wiring, and burned out. He came by to my gate and asked me if I turned off my water,
And I said, "Oh, yeah, my tank had a new leak on a pipe and I turned it off for the next day until the plumber came by to fix the issue." Y'all, the look on his face, he kept a straight one, but I just knew he was holding back. He just said, "Oh, okay," and went back inside. Not sure if he knows I know, but I don't care because he can't do anything. I'm getting a plumber down next week to correct my plumbing and remove any pipes that leave my property. So I got rid of my water issue and a neighbor who could potentially be a pain in the ass by simply flicking a tap off. Two birds, one stone, I'd say.
Hurt my friend? Good luck with your education. I recognize this is long. Feel free to skip if you don't have the time or patience. And also, if this more petty than pro, I can move it. Back in the before times when the internet was still a new thing with lots of potential, I was enrolled at my local junior college. A little into the semester, I moved in with my GF so we could both save on rent. I will call my girlfriend Lucy for the purposes of this post. One night, Lucy says she invited a friend from one of her classes for a game night. Sounded good to me. We invited a couple of other friends, and it was a really fun night. Surprisingly, it turned out her friend, Sarah, was someone I knew from high school. We weren't close friends, but we knew each other and got along fine. After that night, Sarah was invited over pretty frequently for dinner, game nights, or to watch a movie. She even brought her boyfriend over a couple of times. I'll call him Jay, but he never quite fit in. He would be quiet or standoffish, wouldn't engage much, and just seemed like he never wanted to be there. It was clear no one really felt comfortable having him there, but we invited him to be polite to Sarah. Fortunately, he only came over 2 or 3 times and found an excuse to refuse every other time. A month or 2 after this all started, Sarah called my GF crying and asked if she could come over. Of course, we said yes. The story that was relayed was Jay was getting very upset with Sarah for coming over to our place so frequently and accused her of cheating on him. She never clarified if he thought she was cheating with me, Lucy, or both, but any option was ridiculous and never happened. But he confronted her and started verbally assaulting her, calling her all kinds of nasty names. At one point, she tried to walk past him to leave, and he shoved her back. This caused her to trip over a coffee table, fall, and get a huge bruise on her butt and lower back. Lucy told me about the bruise as Sarah had shown her. I didn't see it for myself. Sarah swore up and down that he had never physically assaulted her before, and she believed it was just an accident. But I was pissed. I wanted revenge. You don't mess with my friends, and you don't assault women. I wanted to beat the crap out of him, but while I'm a big guy, I've never been in a fight and am not a violent person. But a revenge plan formed in my mind. At the time, I was working in the administration building of the school as a student employee. As part of my job, I could access anyone's student records, their fees, and their class schedule. The date was fast approaching that was the last possible day to drop or add classes without penalty or specific permission. So I looked Jay up in the system, got his student ID number and the other information that I needed, and put my plan into motion. On the last day to change schedules, I used the dedicated enrollment phones in the administration building. Internet class scheduling wasn't a thing that was set up yet, and canceled all of his classes. Not only that, but I went through and added every class I could find that had a course fee. If you owed a debt at the school, you couldn't get copies or your transcripts or anything else. Something that I didn't mention was that Jay was a foreign student and couldn't stay in the country if he wasn't enrolled with a certain number of units. I wish I could give more info about the fallout, but as I didn't want this to get traced back to me, I didn't tell anyone. Nor did I pull up his records again for quite a while. I did get a little payoff, though. Sarah was really worried about seeing him again, as she had broken up with him the night after he pushed her, as they had an English class together on Tuesdays. She said that on Tuesday, he was there, but there was also someone new standing in the class. He was standing because there weren't enough seats.
The teacher, seeing that there were more people than should be held, took roll. And guess who wasn't on it? You're right, it was Jay. Apparently, after I dropped all his classes, someone on the wait list got in. Jay tried to argue with the teacher, but as Teach had the official class roster and Jay wasn't on it, there was nothing he could do. Sarah said she never saw Jay in that class again. I don't know much more about what happened. Lucy and I eventually broke up, so I didn't see Sarah very often after that. After a while, I did look up Jay's class schedule, and all of the classes with a course fee were gone, but he didn't have any other classes on the books. I wanted to assume he was kicked out of school, but I didn't try to confirm it. Either way, Sarah didn't have a class with him, and while he probably deserved more, he was definitely inconvenienced and possibly kicked out of school. Sometimes I worry I was too harsh, but then I remember that he deserved it. Mess with me, but not my friends. As of me reading this, I have to say this was the kind of quiet, behind-the-scenes revenge that hits different. No shouting match, no dramatic confrontation, just clean, strategic sabotage that hit the guy where it actually hurt. And yeah, maybe dropping someone from all their classes sounds extreme, but if you put your hands on someone, especially someone who trusted you, then consequences don't get to be convenient. It wasn't just petty, it was precise. Anyway, that's one revenge story wrapped up. Let's roll into the next one because the internet never runs out of people getting exactly what they asked for.
Tricking my slacker coworker into sabotaging himself. I work in an office with a guy I'll call Seth. Seth is that coworker everyone knows. Lazy, always passing his work on to someone else, and somehow always getting away with it. He'll sit around on his phone or go to the bathroom every 10 minutes. He's the kind of guy who will show up late, make some lame excuse about traffic, and then disappear for lunch for 2 hours. For the past 6 months, Seth's favorite target has been me. He'll send emails asking if I can help out with a project, but what he really means is do all the work while I take the credit. I complained to my boss a couple of times, but somehow Seth always managed to weasel his way out of trouble. The final straw came when he passed off a major report that was due to a client in 2 days, dumping it on me last minute. One day, I casually asked him if he was good with Excel, and he admitted he didn't know much about it. Perfect. The next time Seth tried to dump a bunch of spreadsheets on me to organize for his next report, I agreed. But this time, I embedded a series of hidden formulas into the documents. These formulas didn't do anything important, just enough to mess with the numbers if someone didn't know how to check for hidden cells. It took me a little time, but I was careful not to make it too obvious. The kicker? Every time Seth tried to copy and paste the data into his report, it would scramble everything just enough to be completely useless. On the day the report was due, Seth slacked off like usual, assuming I had handled it like always. When the client called, furious because the report was filled with nonsense numbers, Seth panicked. He rushed to fix it. But every time he tried to fix one part of the report, something else would break. He came to me, frantic, and asked for help. I acted confused and said, "Oh, I don't know what happened. Maybe it's a glitch." I gave him some vague advice and watched as he spent the entire day trying to salvage his mess. Our boss found out, and for once, Seth couldn't talk his way out of it. He got lambasted for screwing up such an important project and was put on temporary leave without pay. I guess he'll be doing his own work from now on. You ever see someone dig their own grave with a spoon and still be shocked when they hit the bottom? That's exactly what happened here. Seth had it coming. And honestly, what I love about this revenge is how subtle it was. No yelling, no drama, just quiet sabotage wrapped in spreadsheets. It's the kind of move that says, I'm done being your doormat without ever raising a voice. That little Excel trap, chef's kiss. Anyway, that's one lazy coworker finally getting a taste of his own medicine. Now wait till you hear what happens in the next one.
spilled my dad's abusive, cheating, and drinking lore to his parents on his birthday. Today is my dad's birthday. It reminds me of what I did for his birthday a few years ago. I'm 17, female, the oldest of 3 siblings, and my dad's been honestly traumatizing all of us, although I think my younger siblings are less aware of it, and threatening us along with my mom to hurt us, even kill us. He also cheated on my mom too and uses her money to either buy alcohol or to spend on his girlfriend who he was cheating with. One time he even threatened to end his life unless we did as he said and attempted in front of me with a fucking rope. I was so done. It was his birthday and we went out with the whole family. Me, my siblings, mom, my grandparents, dad, and dad's siblings were there too. We were going to celebrate his birthday, and I took this as the golden opportunity. I always knew he was very, very scared of his family finding out about how much he's changed, as I'm pretty sure he acts like a good person in front of his family, then abuses the shit out of us when they're gone. He cares a lot about his parents and siblings and what they think. Anyways, he went to the bathroom mid-dinner, and I just very casually spilled everything. Like, yeah, OMG, that reminds me of that time he beat us. Oh wait, he didn't tell you? And so on. I'm still proud of it to this day. Bet he had the shittiest birthday ever. Edit. Y'all keep asking for more details, but I left them out on purpose because it's too long, I wanted it to be a fast read, I wasn't looking for pity or comfort. I went into more detail in the comments section, but to save you some time scrolling and save myself time typing, I just copied and pasted some. 1. I can see why you think it's generic because I said he beat us. But the beating was not the worst problem for me, and I assure you it's real. The worst part was watching him attempt. I was 13, so I was really traumatized, and I didn't really care if he died, but I was just scared because he said it was my fault, and then he said, he was bluffing at the time, but I didn't know, that he told everyone that he is killing himself because of me and that he would ruin my life after his death. It was that and the way I saw the noose hanging from the ceiling fan because I wasn't expecting it. He never showed signs of suicide before, it's always just been me, and it just gave me a fucking scare and he just stood next to the chair yelling at me. And then after we argued a bit, he got up on the chair and it was just escalating, and that was what traumatized me most. I do not care about the beating as much if I'm being honest. I fell into this addiction of self-harm and physical pain, so it just stopped bothering me. But seeing him trying to kill himself, that was what bothered me most. 2. I called the cops. They gave a warning because they said I have insufficient evidence. Made everything worse because then he found out that I called the cops when they gave him a warning and he lost it at me. 3. I didn't want to make it too lengthy or serious. Grams and Gramps barely said anything. They just had tears rolling down. I always thought of recording things, but he always does shit randomly, and I can't just, hold on, don't hurt me yet, I need to press record, so unfortunately, no. This is also the reason I was unable to get cops to do anything fucking useful. I spilled the lore very quickly because I didn't want him to come back and interrupt me. But to answer the first thing you said, he's just fucking psycho. I was traumatized as shit and I would be getting constant nightmares about him getting drunk and hurting me. I experienced hallucinations and had a million suicidal thoughts. I couldn't go to sleep at all and it was so fucking bad because I had to try protect my younger siblings from what was happening while trying to juggle my finals for school. I didn't include this in the post because I'm not looking for comfort or pity, nor am I venting. 4. They were in shock and did not say anything, but both his parents cried. Their reactions were lame, so I didn't include it in the post. When he got back from the bathroom, there was no one talking about it, but it was an obvious tension. We went back home in separate vehicles, and when he found out, he was very mad and tried to hurt me, but it's not my business that a man toddler is throwing a tantrum. 5. Everyone calling this AI has no argument or points backing it up. Do you see M-dashes, random cliché metaphors or similes the way AI does it? No.
Also, AI does not dive into suicidal topics because it's against their policy. I admitted that Dad's parents' reactions were lame. Don't you think if I wanted this to be the ultimate revenge, I would have made their reactions better, like my dad truly got the punishment he deserved? But not everything works like that. They had a lame reaction, but I'm sure it was just on surface, and he got in trouble in private. Just wish I was there to see it. People who say this is AI pulled this conclusion out of the fact that what I did as revenge was too good for them to comprehend clearly. As I'm reading this, I'm just sitting here in absolute awe at the level of strength it takes to do what the writer did. That wasn't just petty revenge, that was truth finally getting oxygen after being suffocated for so long. Exposing someone like that in front of the very people they work so hard to impress? That's not just gutsy, it's a kind of justice most victims only dream about. And yeah, the fallout was rough, but damn, sometimes saying it out loud is the power move. The fact that she still stood her ground even after the rage came back at her says everything. That story hit deep, but the next one coming, it hits in a whole different way.
My roommates hated my cats and crashed out on me. I sued them and won. Alrighty, I, F23, had roommates Fern, F23, and Eric, M23. Fern was an ex-coworker and reached out to me. We talked and we're both trying to move out. She and Eric are engaged and have 2 large dogs, one being a puppy. They wanted to rent a house that had a yard but couldn't afford it without a roommate and asked me to become a roommate. I have 2 cats and we all agreed all animals were okay. In October, we all moved into a nice house, 3 bedrooms upstairs and 1 larger one downstairs with a wall connected to the living room. I had the downstairs bedroom. Fern took 1 bedroom as an office. Fern and Eric took 1 bedroom as a bedroom, and then they took the other upstairs bedroom as a getting ready area. I don't know. One of my cats, Mario, took very well to the change. He was cautious for about a week, but then did great. Luigi, my other kitty, had a tougher time. He only stayed in my room and rarely came out. The dogs mainly stayed in the living room. Luigi began to come out occasionally after a month, but would run away when approached outside of my bedroom. I bought gates for doorways that allow cats through so that when needed, we could keep the dogs away from the cats. Essentially, Luigi finally became comfortable in the house and explored upstairs. Fern saw him in her office and lost it. Since the whole upstairs is their space, I offered to buy a gate for the stairs, that way the cats won't go upstairs. That seemed fair to me. Well, she said no because she'd fall. That honestly made no sense, but okay. So I then offer another solution. They close the doors to the rooms upstairs, that way the cats can't go in and there is no gate. Fern said that is not possible because it gets too cold upstairs. The solution she offered was my cats only stay in my room and the living room, which they didn't love become the dogs. Before, they had been allowed in the kitchen, which is the pathway to the cat tree, which Fern refused to allow in the living room. My cats were trapped, while her messy and untrained dogs went everywhere. I told her she was being ridiculous and unreasonable, and I had offered 2 great solutions and would pay for the one that required it. She said those were not solutions, and if I didn't like her rules, then I could get out. I started tearing up because honestly, she and Eric had been so nice before. I was just shocked that they switched up so quickly. She then said, "What, you're gonna cry about it now?" Like, bitch, I losing my housing situation. Yes, I am. Anyway, mid-December is when the argument went down. And I took my cats to my parents because I didn't know if they were safe there because of Fern's unexpected behavior. I packed all my stuff up and moved in to my parents. Mid-January, we amended the lease to remove me from it. It actually cost $300 to do that, and since they wanted me out, I said they should pay it. They refused, but I said I would pay the $300 fee if they give me the $700 portion I paid to the security deposit that I would never see again. They agreed to that and said they would pay me on the specific date I signed off the lease.
Those were the only conditions, and all over text message. Come the day I sign off the lease, in January, they text me that I will not be receiving any money from them because I left the room a mess. Okay, that's fine. I took a video and photos of the room the day I vacated. I had vacuumed and taken all of my stuff. I texted them that I would see them in court, and they laughed and said there was no way I could afford court and that I would have zero case. I proceeded to take them to small claims court. They avoided certified mail service, which cost $90. I then had to pay $90 for process servers, people that will testify they served Fern and Eric. Today came the day, and I was so nervous, but felt that I would win. I got to the courtroom early, watched the people before me act all catty, disrespectful to each other, and honestly saw the magistrate react, so I decided I would do my best to remain calm and on the facts when I spoke. Fern and Eric show up 2 minutes late, and we begin. I share that when I asked if I paid the $300 vacating fee, would they pay me back $700, they texted me, and I quote, "Of course that is your money." I told the magistrate that the lease and my state's law dictate that a landlord has 30 days after a tenant vacates to create an itemized list of damages that I was responsible for, and I had never received any such list, and therefore caused no damage. I mentioned I have photos of the room as I left it, and then have to show Fern and Eric the photos before I show the magistrate. They get their turn. Fern says, well, I changed my mind because she left the room in a disarray. It smelt like cat urine and had stains all over. Then she referenced my photos to the magistrate and said you could see stains in the photos. The magistrate analyzed the photos and the text's confirmation that I would be paid under the specific conditions. He said in the photos, a landlord would not see any damage, and the only thing he sees on the carpet is vacuum lines. That was amazing. Towards the end, the magistrate asks if we have any else to add before he makes a verdict. Fern copped up and mentioned that I had not been kicked out and that I left in December all of a sudden. Weird. The magistrate said I wasn't claiming to be kicked out. I confirmed that was not my claim and reaffirmed my claim and mentioned I left in December because I didn't know if my cats would be safe with people who didn't like or want them around. So I just took them to my parents, just in case. That did not matter. Either way, he makes his verdict and states I have the burden of proof and they owe me the $700 plus the $180 court fees. So I typed this in my notes because I couldn't share until after the appeal period. Good thing I waited because they decided to appeal. Before we went before a magistrate, this time we go in front of a judge. Fun facts about their puppy. They didn't let it out enough and it would poop inside a lot and often outside my bedroom door. They didn't like them going out in bad weather because it made the carpets and white furniture dirty. Overall, they just didn't seem like the best puppy owners. Once, both dogs ran away because they let them off lease in the front yard, and luckily they weren't hit because we're near busy roads. But they did go to a greenhouse and roll around in manure. The dog always jumped, which I was fine with, but it was annoying since they lost it over my cat's existing. The other dog was super friendly and generally listened. After the appeal, today was the appeal. I showed up and waited and waited. Apparently, they canceled the appeal, so I win. Yay. And very surprisingly, they paid me today as well. I'm very happy to say this period of life where they are a part of mine is completely done and had a happy ending. As I'm sitting here reading this, I'm just floored by how entitled some people can be. You open your home to them, try to compromise, and suddenly they flip the script like you're the problem for having cats in a house you all agreed to share. The part that really got me was how confidently they thought they could screw someone over, laugh in their face, and walk away with zero consequences, only to get smacked down by the facts and the law. Honestly, it's not just petty revenge, it's justice, plain and simple. And something about seeing people like that actually pay up in the end, so satisfying. Anyway, that was one wild ride, but the next story, it's got a twist you won't see coming.
Classmate got pranked by fake letter after screwing us over. Old story. This is a very old revenge from when I was a teenager in the 90s. There were only a few PC gamers around at the time, and without internet, it was hard to get hold of new games. Me and a friend bought games from abroad via airmail because local stores didn't sell many, but these weren't cheap. We'd trade them with each other and would copy the copy protection, which was often included, so this made it semi-affordable for us. A new kid joined our class, however, and his uncle had tons and tons of games we didn't have. We offered to trade games with him and gave him our original copies for him to copy, and in return, we got corrupted floppies. Yes, this was the 90s. Missing copy protection, etc. And after a few months of this, we received not a single working game, while he had received all of our games, the Settlers, Doom 2, Monkey Island games, etc. And some he returned in less than nice condition. We had enough and we wanted to get revenge, but we didn't know how. Now, the 90s were known for the many AIDS campaigns after Freddie Mercury died of AIDS in 1991. I was a huge fan of Queen, and this new friend would often mock me for liking a gay singer. He came from a very conservative family, and his mother was quite Catholic, and this is what gave us an idea when we had to attend an AIDS event organized by a certain foundation with our class. At the end, we were given flyers about AIDS, homosexuality, etc., and free condoms with the logo of the AIDS Foundation were up for grabs. We each grabbed a few for reasons you'll soon reach below. Me and my friend were one of the very few with a computer and inkjet printer at home, so we got this idea to screw him over. We created a fake letter addressed to our friend, pretending we were the AIDS Foundation, copying the logo and everything to make it look as authentic as possible. It went something like this. Dear first name, thank you for your letter. We understand it's difficult being open about being homosexual, and you have many questions after the event you attended with your class. Please find enclosed a flyer which should answer many of your questions, as well as some condoms. Please practice safe sex at all times. We enclosed all the flyers we had gotten at the event, as well as the condoms, and mailed it to Mr. Last Name to guarantee his father would open the letter first. We had no idea the shitstorm this would create. We knew him being homophobic, this would be great revenge, but apparently his mother had been in tears, screaming, his father angry, and he was grounded for weeks with his parents convinced he was gay. In the end, he figured we had something to do with it because we had been carefully fishing to see if our prank had succeeded. But at first, he thought the letter was authentic and we had contacted the foundation in his name. When we finally confessed we had faked it all, we had a nice trip to the principal to explain why we had done this, with his parents present. It's still the best revenge I ever took in my life, even though it was 30 years ago. As of me reading this, I've got to admit this is one of those stories that leaves you torn between shaking your head and slow clapping. It's a revenge that was both wildly inappropriate and somehow undeniably clever. The 90s were chaotic like that. Was it extreme? For sure. But when you stack up months of being used and mocked, that kind of pent-up teenage spite doesn't just go away quietly. It explodes. Printed logos, fake letters, and all. Honestly, it was brutal, but weirdly poetic. And if you think this level of petty was wild, just wait till you hear what's coming up next. Spilled her beer on my wife's feet and ignored it. We were at the recent Wu-Tang Clan show at Madison Square Garden the other night, and this small group of people in front of us seemed to be having a great time. It was an odd pairing of two middle-aged folks and what I'm assuming was their 30-something-year-old daughter. Not sure. Anyway, you could tell she was a type, taking selfie videos every 5 minutes and had no idea why she was there other than to party. Which, to be fair, that's fine, and I don't really care if people do it regardless of how cringy I find it. But she was flailing herself all around and dancing like she was the next Oracle of Delphi. This is where we had a problem. She had sat her large beer cup on her seat, and my wife's seat was just behind hers. About 1 minute after she set it there, she did one of her prophecy reading maneuvers and knocked the beer over backwards onto my wife's feet and filling one of her shoes partially. It also splashed over onto one of my buddies sitting in the row on the other side of my wife's seat. This woman-child
looked back at me and my wife in horror for 1 second, realized she had messed up, and then decided she was going to go on about her business and ignore the issue completely. She did not apologize, she didn't acknowledge, she just kept on going. This was the moment that upset me the most. Sure, getting a beer down your shoe sucks, but what really sucks is when the person who does it has absolutely no remorse for what they had done, accident or not, and chooses not to apologize. So, I did what any normal person would do in that situation. I picked up the beer cup. They had lids with large holes, but still some form of lid, so it was still about half full, and removed the lid and dumped it all over her seat. Foam cushion for good absorption, and a small amount over the front onto her feet as well. She looked back for a brief second when her feet got wet, and we met eyes as I was doing my best customer service style smile for her while holding the now empty beer cup over her seat. She quickly looked away and continued her dancing, choosing to continue to ignore the situation. The best part was her knowing she couldn't sit down, but also not wanting to tell the two she was with what had happened because she already accepted mentally she wasn't going to admit fault. So she stood awkwardly when the other two sat down, and after a minute, the guy, father, also quite intoxicated, pulled her down into her seat after she was hesitating for so long. The beer started oozing out of the cushion the second she sat down, and she convulsed, TBH, in about the same way she had been standing the whole time, and writhed around in the beer chair for a minute while being held into it by her male companion, you have to love it, before standing back up with a completely soaked ass full of beer. Her pants were wet from the belt line down past her knees. She continued to get pulled down into her seat by the guy multiple other times before the show ended. I don't think I've had a small petty revenge work out so well in my favor before, and it was quite thrilling. Thankfully, I was able to put a smile back on my wife's face after she saw her stand back up the first time. As I'm reading this, all I can think is, yeah, sometimes karma just needs a little nudge. There's something especially satisfying about giving someone exactly the mess they handed you, especially when they had the audacity to act like it never happened. No apology, no accountability, just vibes and spilled beer. So the fact that she ended up stewing in her own drink while pretending nothing was wrong, poetic. And watching her get yanked back down into that soaked seat again and again, that's what I call justice served cold and wet. Anyway, that one hit all the right notes, but stick around because the next revenge, it hits just as hard. Got guilt-tripped over a tip, so I left 10 cents instead. I work in custodial at a resort. I clean puke, piss, shit in both guest and employee bathrooms, including the ones the bar staff use. One day after work, I went to the resort bar, not a sit-down place, and bought a $9 pre-made drink. The bartender just poured it over ice with a bit of oat milk. I didn't tip. I usually don't for counter service, especially when the food, drinks are already overpriced. As I was waiting, I saw her glance at the receipt. Then she turned to me and said, "What department are you in?" I said, "I work in cleaning." Then she hit me with, "Well, it's really important to tip because it goes around." I was honestly shocked. It felt super passive-aggressive and like she was calling me out. I didn't even order food, just a drink she poured from a bottle. I don't believe tipping should be treated like an obligation, especially when I do some of the dirtiest work at the resort and don't get tips myself. So later that same day, I went back and ordered another drink, and this time I tipped exactly 10 cents. Not out of malice, but just to make a point. If you're going to shame me for not tipping, I'll still tip, but on my terms. Ever since then, she's been cold toward me and avoids talking to me, but I have no regrets. Don't guilt trip the janitor. We've seen too much. Reading this, all I can say is, yeah, that bartender messed around and found out. As someone who has been on the receiving end of underappreciated, grimy work, I completely get it. You bust your ass cleaning literal human messes and no one's tipping you. Then suddenly someone pours oat milk over ice and acts like you owe them something. Nah, that 10-cent tip wasn't petty, it was a message. loud, clear, and deserved. And honestly, if she's still salty, that just proves the point. But hey, that's just one kind of revenge. The next one coming up, it hits real different.
Kept leaning on me on a bus? Enjoy the floor, ma'am. This happened recently on a semi-crowded bus. I was standing in the middle of the bus. Although there was plenty of space around, this woman decided to stand right next to me. After a few moments, she started leaning her shoulder against mine. I politely asked her to move a little away since it was uncomfortable. I thought this was basic manner. She did, but only for a few minutes. Then she came back again to use me as her human pillar. I can't even tell how pissed off I was, so I decided to take my petty revenge. Once she got comfortable using me as her support again, I suddenly took a step back without warning, so she lost her balance and fell down right away. Stood up, looked at me, didn't say a word, and stood well away from me for the rest of the ride. Edit. I think I need to mention a few things. I'm a girl, a lot of you guys thinking I'm a guy. The woman looked perfectly fine. No visible health issues. If that was the case, I'd never do this to her. I'm not that insensitive. I can tell she wasn't a pickpocket because my bag was on my other shoulder and she had her back against me. I'm so careful with these things. The weather was hot and humid AF, and that situation was sweaty. That's why I was more pissed off than I would have been on a normal day. As of me reading this, I gotta say, I totally get it. When someone keeps invading your space like that after you've already been polite, it's beyond frustrating. Especially in hot, humid weather where everyone's already irritated and sticky. It's not about being mean. It's about being pushed past your limit after giving someone a chance to just respect the boundary you clearly set. Was it petty? Maybe, but honestly, it was well earned. And the way she didn't say a word after hitting the floor, yeah, she knew. Anyway, that's one revenge that definitely hit the mark. Now, let's move on to the next petty masterpiece. Make me sing when I'm sick? I'll make you retire. A little context before I start this story. For my high school, at least, solo and ensemble participation for the first round was mandatory, and the number of kids who went on to further rounds reflected better on the director. To have a kid not participate or drop out was a huge problem. I, 34 female, have never been a petty person, and this was especially true back in high school when this story takes place. Back then, I, 16 female, was truly quite the doormat, but my one source of true pride, nay, vanity, was my singing voice. I was in the top choir in my school and consistently performed well in UIL and solo and ensemble competitions. This was Texas, so I was constantly competing with the best high school singers in the state, and I consistently did very well. I never placed below 5th chair, usually placing in the 2nd or 3rd chair. And then, my sophomore year of high school, I developed laryngitis the week of solo and ensemble. I was devastated, but I knew there was no way I could sing and possibly receive a good score, and that was my bigger issue. I was not going to fuck with my near-perfect solo and ensemble record, so I went to my choir director, who we'll call Mr. Fish, 50 male. Now, Mr. Fish had been teaching at my high school for some years already, and had been doing very well. We'd won competitions, gone on national tours, the whole 9 yards. Great track record. I'd sat out of practices and class earlier in the week, as well as evening rehearsals. Both I and my mother had sent him emails with doctor's notes about my condition, so I felt no guilt going up to him and telling him, as everyone is loading up the bus to head to the competition, that I needed to back out because I was incapable of participating due to my illness. I'd intended to try, but after checking my voice the morning of the competition, it just wasn't going to work. And this motherfucker looked 16-year-old, nearly voiceless me dead in the eye and said, "Just suck on a lozenge, this is required." So I got on the bus and participated in the solo and ensemble competition like Mr. Fish made me, and just like I knew was going to happen, when it came my turn to sing, I opened my mouth and nothing came out. I got a 16 out of 100 as a final score. Mr. Fish refused to look at me when he handed me my scorecard, but I was pissed. I was humiliated.
I wanted revenge. So, junior year comes around. I'm now 17 female, and I've worked my ass off for this year's solo and ensemble. My voice has never sounded so good. I'm top of the choir. The soprano who usually beats me out for solos gets left in the dust. Life is great. Solo and ensemble comes, participation is required as usual. I make no indication that my humiliation from last year is still on my mind. I just absolutely knock the competition out of the park and get first chair. Bam! Love it. The entire choir loses their minds when it's announced. No one's made first chair in ages. Holy shit. I let that announcement simmer for a day or so, I can't remember how long, but not too long afterwards, I sent an email to Mr. Fish, our assistant choir director, and the solo and ensemble director, announcing that I would be dropping from first chair. This was a Friday evening, so I knew the havoc it'd wreak. The house phone started ringing almost immediately. This was the early 2000s, and my mom said it was Mr. Fish for me. I answered, and we started off with vague pleasantries before he nearly demanded to know why I was dropping out. God, I can quote the rest of that phone call by heart. "Ah, yes, I thought you'd be curious. Do you remember last year's solo and ensemble when I told you I was sick and shouldn't participate, but you made me do it anyway, and I humiliated myself?" "Yes, that's why. Have a good night, Mr. Fish." Click. Mr. Fish announced his retirement not even 3 weeks later, though he finished out the rest of the school year. I made first chair again senior year. As of me reading this, I have to admit, there's something wildly satisfying about the long game. This wasn't just petty, it was precise. The way the writer took that public humiliation, held onto it, and then delivered the calmest, coldest revenge exactly when it would matter most, chef's kiss. Mr. Fish really thought he could force someone to destroy their voice for the sake of his ego and walk away untouched. Nah, he didn't just get called out, he got retired. And that's the kind of poetic ending we live for.